The night a pregnant doctor chose to save a stranger. She had no idea she was delivering the life of the man who once broke her heart, and unknowingly carried his child inside her. Before we begin, take a moment as you listen or read. Do you believe love always finds its way back? Tell us in the comments what you think as the story unfolds. Hello beautiful souls, and welcome to Ms. Love Stories channel, the place where love, drama, and unforgettable moments come alive. I'm so thrilled you're here, ready to dive into stories that will make your heart race, bring tears, and leave you believing in the power of love. Before we begin, I want to get to know all of you. Comment below and tell me where you're watching from, because in the next video, I'll give a special shout out to some of you amazing viewers from around the world. I can't wait to see how far our love story family reaches. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell, so you never miss a single emotional journey. Get ready to feel, laugh, cry, and fall in love all over again, because every story we share here is for you. Now, the story begins. Rose. The hospital smelled of antiseptic, metal, and exhaustion. Dr. Becky Collins stood alone in the on-call room, one hand gripping the edge of the sink, the other resting instinctively on her swollen belly. 7 months pregnant. No ring. No partner pacing the hallway with flowers or fear in his eyes. Just her reflection in the cracked mirror, dark circles under sharp eyes, hair pulled into a bun that hadn't been redone in hours, and a white coat stretched tight over a life she had never planned to carry alone. She breathed through another wave of nausea, slow and practiced, the way she coached her patients to breathe through pain. "You're fine," she whispered to herself. "You're always fine." But the truth was heavier than the baby pressing against her ribs. Becky had learned long ago how to survive without asking for help. Medical school had taught her discipline. Residency had taught her endurance. Life had taught her silence. She adjusted her coat and reached for her pager just as it screamed. Code red. Private wing. Emergency labor complication. Her heart jumped, not from fear, but from instinct. Doctor first. Always doctor first. She turned toward the door, then froze as another sharp pain sliced through her abdomen. Not strong enough to alarm her. Not yet. Just a reminder. You're carrying a life while saving others, she thought bitterly. Funny how that works. She straightened, grabbed her stethoscope and walked out. Across the city, in a glass tower overlooking millions of glowing lives, David Harrison stared at the city like it owed him something. At 42, David was everything the world admired and envied. Billionaire tech CEO, decisive, ruthless when necessary, untouchable when not. His tailored suit fit him perfectly. His penthouse was immaculate. His calendar was booked months in advance. Yet none of it quieted the restlessness in his chest. The phone buzzed on the marble counter. "Sir," his assistant said, breathless. "The surrogate has gone into early labor. Severe complications. The doctors recommend immediate hospital transfer." David closed his eyes. This wasn't supposed to happen. Nothing in his life ever happened without planning. Contracts. Timelines. Safeguards. Children were variables. Emotions were liabilities. That's why he'd chosen distance. Control. No messy entanglements. "I'm on my way," he said curtly, already grabbing his coat. As the elevator descended, something unfamiliar crept into his thoughts. Not fear of loss, but an ache he couldn't name. A memory he'd buried deep. A woman with kind eyes and stubborn pride. A night that had meant more than he'd ever admitted. A goodbye he never explained. Becky, his mind whispered before he shut it down. That life was over. Becky moved swiftly through the maternity ward. Her voice calm, her hands steady. Nurses followed her lead without question. Patients trusted her without knowing why. She was good at this, saving lives, delivering hope into trembling hands. What she wasn't good at was remembering herself. In between patients, she sat for a moment, pressing her palm against her belly. "I know," she murmured softly. "I'll slow down soon. Just not today." The baby kicked, firm and insistent, like an answer. Her phone buzzed. A message from her mother she hadn't opened yet. "You don't have to do this alone." Becky locked the screen. She'd learned what relying on someone meant. She'd loved once, trusted once, and lost everything she thought she'd have. The car sped through traffic, sirens clearing his path. David's jaw tightened as the hospital loomed into view. He told himself this wasn't personal. It was responsibility, legacy, obligation. But when the driver announced, "We've arrived, sir," his chest tightened like it hadn't in years. Hospitals had a way of stripping power away. No boardrooms. No contracts. Just life and loss. And somewhere inside, something waited to be decided. Becky exited an elevator, just as another one opened across the hall. She didn't look up. Didn't see the tall man step out surrounded by staff. Didn't notice the familiar cadence of his walk. David glanced down the corridor, distracted by urgent voices and flashing monitors. He didn't see her either. Two lives, separated by seconds. Two hearts carrying the same secret. A nurse rushed past Becky. "Doctor, the patient in private wing B is crashing. The Billionaire." Becky nodded sharply. "Prep the OR." As she turned toward the operating theater, her hand instinctively shielded her belly, unaware that behind those doors waited not just a patient, but the father of her child. If this beginning pulled you in, pause for a moment. Speech balloon. Do you think some people are meant to meet again, no matter how far life pulls them apart? Tell us your thoughts in the comments before we continue. The doors to the operating theater burst open. Blood pressure dropping. "Prep the ventilator. We're losing him." Becky stepped inside like the chaos belonged to her. The noise faded into pattern, into rhythm. Alarms became information. Voices became data. Fear became focus. She scrubbed in quickly, her hands steady despite the tightening in her lower back. "What happened?" she asked. The head nurse spoke fast. Male, early 40s. Brought in from a private clinic. Acute complications during assisted labor procedure. Multiple system stress. He collapsed en route. Becky frowned. Assisted labor? For him. Surrogate delivery complications caused a chain reaction. He insisted on staying present. Then he crashed. Becky nodded once. People made irrational decisions when life was on the line. She understood that. "Let's move," she said. They wheeled the patient into position. Drapes were pulled. Lights adjusted. "Doctor." A nurse hesitated. "His chart." "I'll read it after," Becky replied. "Right now we save him." As she leaned in, adjusting the monitors, her gaze flicked briefly to the patient's face. And her world stopped. Time fractured. The room tilted, as if the floor had shifted beneath her feet. David Harrison. Her breath caught so sharply it hurt. No. No, no, no. Her mind rejected it before her eyes could deny it. Same strong jaw. Same faint scar near his temple. Same lashes she once traced with her finger in the dark. The man she had loved. The man who had walked away without looking back. The man who never knew she was pregnant. A nurse called her name. "Doctor." Becky swallowed hard. Her hand instinctively pressed against her belly beneath the surgical gown. Of all the hospitals. Of all the nights. David lay unconscious, pale, vulnerable in a way she had never seen him. Tubes ran from his body. Machines breathed for him. The billionaire who controlled boardrooms now couldn't control his own heartbeat. Her chest tightened. Not with anger, not with longing, but with something far more dangerous. Memory. "You okay, doctor?" the anesthesiologist asked quietly. Becky forced her voice to work. "Yes. Continue." This was her job. She stepped closer, blocking out the past with sheer will. "Vitals. Unstable." "Then we stabilize," she said firmly. "On my count." As they worked, her body moved on instinct, but her mind betrayed her. Every touch, every command echoed with a history no one else in the room could hear. She remembered David's laugh. Low, rare, genuine. She remembered the way he listened when no one else did. She remembered the night that changed everything. Focus, she told herself. He's a patient. But when David groaned softly, her heart slammed against her ribs. Pressure's dropping again, a nurse said. "Adrenaline," Becky ordered. "Now." David's body jerked slightly as the medication surged. "Come on," Becky whispered under her breath, so low no one heard. "Don't you dare die on me." The words surprised her. The emotion behind them terrified her. David floated somewhere dark and heavy. He could hear voices, muffled, distant. Feel pain without shape. Weight without form. Then her voice. Calm. Steady. Familiar in a way that made his chest ache. Becky. The name surfaced like a ghost. Impossible. His mind reached for the memory of her smile. The warmth he hadn't earned. The goodbye he hadn't explained. The voice spoke again, closer now. Stay with me, she said. David's fingers twitched. Doctor, someone shouted. He's responding. Becky leaned closer, her breath hitching. David, she said before she could stop herself. The name slipped out, soft, intimate, devastating. The monitor steadied just a fraction. Her eyes burned. She straightened instantly, schooling her face. Continue protocol. Minutes stretched like hours. Sweat dampened her hairline. Her back throbbed. Another sharp pain bloomed low in her abdomen, stronger this time. She ignored it. Not now. Doctor, are you sure you should be? A nurse began, glancing at Becky's belly. I'm fine, Becky snapped, sharper than intended. She softened her tone. I'm fine. Another contraction rolled through her. She breathed through it silently, jaw clenched, hands never pausing. The irony nearly broke her. She was in labor, early, unpredictable, while saving the man who had unknowingly put her in this position. Life had a cruel sense of timing. Vitals stabilizing, the anesthesiologist announced. A wave of relief washed through the room. Becky nodded once. Good. Transfer him to ICU once we're clear. As they prepared to move David, Becky caught herself staring at him again. He looked smaller like this. Human. Not the untouchable man from magazine covers. Not the ghost from her past. Just a man whose life she had just saved. Her baby kicked hard, almost violently. She flinched. He's your father, she thought, the truth roaring inside her like thunder. And he has no idea. The gurney rolled out. Becky removed her gloves with trembling fingers. You did good work, doctor, the head nurse said. You saved him. Becky forced a nod. Saved him. She pressed her palm to her belly again as another wave of pain surged, stronger, undeniable. This time she gasped. Doctor? The nurse asked, alarmed. Are you okay? Becky closed her eyes. No, she whispered. I don't think I am. Somewhere down the hall, David Harrison breathed because of her. And inside her, his child demanded to be born. Two lives bound by one truth. Still completely unaware of each other. Speech balloon. Do you think Becky should tell David the truth, or protect herself and her child at all costs? Tell us what you think in the comments. The hospital corridor felt colder than before. Becky sat on a narrow bed in an empty exam room. Her shoes kicked off, her hands resting on her belly as another mild contraction passed. Not strong enough to alarm the staff. Strong enough to remind her that nothing, not her body, not her heart, was under her control anymore. A nurse checked her vitals, then smiled reassuringly. You're not in active labor yet. But you should rest. Rest. The word felt absurd. Becky nodded anyway. As soon as the door closed, she exhaled shakily and leaned back against the wall. David is here. The thought kept repeating, louder than the contractions. Not a memory. Not a mistake from the past. Here. Alive. Breathing. Because of her. She pressed her palm to her belly, grounding herself. We're okay, she whispered. Just us. The baby shifted, slower now, as if listening. Becky closed her eyes, but the image wouldn't leave. David's face pale under surgical lights. The vulnerability she'd never been allowed to see before. It doesn't mean anything, she told herself. He's a patient. That's all. But her heart refused to cooperate. David woke to silence. Not the comfortable silence of his penthouse, but the sterile hush of machines and soft footsteps. He blinked, disoriented. Tubes. Monitors. The smell of disinfectant. Hospital. Memory rushed in like a wave. Sirens, pain, darkness. He tried to sit up. A sharp ache stopped him. Easy. A nurse said gently, appearing at his side. You gave us a scare. What happened? His voice sounded rough, unfamiliar. You collapsed during the surrogate's labor. You're stable now. The surrogate. He nodded slowly, relief and guilt tangling in his chest. Then another thought surfaced, unwanted, insistent. Her voice. Calm. Steady. Impossible. David frowned. Who was the doctor? The nurse paused. Dr. Collins. She led the procedure. Something tightened in his chest. Collins, he repeated. First name. The nurse glanced at the chart. Becky. The world tilted. No, he whispered. But the feeling was already there. The same pull he hadn't felt in years. Is she still here? He asked, hating how much the answer mattered. She's resting. She had a long night. David nodded, though his mind raced. Becky. Here. After all this time. It can't mean anything, he told himself. Coincidence. Fate playing tricks. Still, his pulse quickened. Becky stood outside the ICU doors unseen. She had changed into clean scrubs. Her hair was loose now, falling around her shoulders. A quiet rebellion against the night's control. Through the glass she saw him. David lay propped up, awake now, speaking softly to a nurse. Alive. Her chest tightened with a relief she refused to acknowledge. He doesn't need you anymore, she told herself. He never did. She turned away before he could look up. Some truths were too dangerous to touch. Later that morning, Becky was called into the department office. Her supervisor's expression was kind but firm. You should take medical leave. I'm fine, Becky replied automatically. You're pregnant. You just performed emergency surgery under extreme stress. And now, he hesitated. Your patient is a high-profile figure. The hospital will want distance. Becky understood the unspoken message. Avoid complications. Avoid entanglements. Of course, she said quietly. As she signed the paperwork, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She ignored it. It buzzed again. Mr. Harrison would like to thank you personally. Her breath caught. She stared at the screen until it went dark. No. David dismissed his staff with practiced ease, but the room felt emptier once they were gone. He stared at the door waiting. She didn't come. The nurse returned. Would you like to see Dr. Collins? David's answer rose instantly, yes, then stalled. What would he say? Thank you for saving my life. I never stopped thinking about you. I'm sorry I left. None of it felt sufficient. Not yet, he said finally. Later. The nurse nodded and left. David exhaled, frustrated. Why now? Why when his life was already full of complications he couldn't name? Becky packed her locker slowly. Each item felt symbolic. Her stethoscope, her worn notebook, the photo of her and her mother tucked in the back. She paused when her hand brushed her belly again. You don't need him, she murmured. We don't. But the words sounded thinner than before. As she walked out of the hospital, sunlight blinded her. Behind her, in a quiet ICU room, David Harrison wondered why the woman who saved his life was already walking away. Two hearts circling the same truth. Both pretending distance was safety. Do you think silence is protecting them? Or slowly tearing them apart? Share your thoughts in the comments. Becky had just stepped out of the hospital when the sky opened, soaking the pavement and blurring the city into streaks of gray. She pulled her coat tighter around her belly, wincing as another contraction rolled through, stronger this time, more insistent. Not now, she begged silently. She took 2 more steps before her vision swam. Doctor, a voice called. She turned just as her knees buckled. David was in a wheelchair, being pushed toward the exit for routine imaging, when he saw her. Becky, standing alone in the rain, pale, unsteady, her body folded inward, one hand reaching instinctively for her stomach. Stop, David ordered, pushing himself up despite the protest of his body. The nurse shouted his name, but David was already moving. Becky hit the ground hard, pain tearing through her like fire. Hands were on her immediately. Becky, David's voice cut through the rain, raw and unmistakable. Her eyes fluttered open. Of all the faces, David, she whispered, disoriented. Their eyes locked. Time collapsed. She was back inside before she fully understood what had happened. A gurney, bright lights, voices overlapping, contractions every 5 minutes. Blood pressure low. She's 7 months pregnant. David stood frozen in the hallway, rain dripping from his hair, his heart pounding like it was trying to escape his chest. 7 months. Pregnant. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He turned to the nurse. Is she? His voice broke. Is the baby okay? We're doing everything we can, the nurse said gently. David ran a hand through his hair, pacing. Becky. Pregnant. And she never told him. The thought burned. You walked away, another voice inside him whispered. You don't get to be angry. The doors closed, leaving him alone with his thoughts. When Becky woke, she was in a private room. David was there, sitting in a chair too small for him, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the floor. Her heart skipped. Why are you here? She asked hoarsely. He looked up instantly. Relief flashed across his face, quickly masked. You collapsed. They brought you in. Silence stretched. The air felt thick with everything unsaid. You shouldn't be here, Becky said softly. Neither should you, David replied. But here we are. She shifted, wincing. Are you okay? He asked, standing. I will be. Another pause. I didn't know, he said finally. About the pregnancy. Her jaw tightened. You weren't supposed to. That's not fair. She laughed bitterly. Neither was leaving. The words hung between them like a blade. David swallowed. I didn't know how to stay. Becky looked away, tears stinging her eyes. Then don't pretend you get to care now. The monitor beeped steadily, a reminder of the life pressing against her ribs. A doctor entered, glancing between them. She's experiencing premature labor signs. Stress-induced. We need to monitor her for at least 24 hours. David didn't hesitate. I'll stay. Becky's head snapped up. No. He stopped himself. She's alone. The doctor nodded. One visitor is allowed. The door closed. They were trapped together. Hours passed slowly. David watched Becky sleep, her face softened by exhaustion. You always did this, he murmured. Carried everything alone. She stirred. I can hear you. He flushed. Sorry. Don't apologize, she said quietly. Just don't disappear again. He looked at her then, really looked at her. I'm here, he said. For now. It wasn't a promise. But it was something. Becky closed her eyes, unsure whether to believe him. Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, two hearts were forced into the same fragile space, with no place left to run. Speech balloon. Do you think forced proximity will heal them? Or tear open old wounds even deeper? Share your thoughts in the comments. The night was quiet for the first time since Becky's arrival at the hospital. The soft hum of machines filled the room, punctuated only by the occasional sigh of the exhausted staff. David had stepped out briefly to call his office, but his mind never left her. Becky sat on the edge of the bed, her belly now resting comfortably on her hand. The adrenaline from the fall and the stress of the day had worn off, leaving a hollow ache in her chest. She wanted to talk. She wanted to explain. But the words felt dangerous, like fire in dry grass. She had promised herself she wouldn't let him close, not yet. Not until she knew he could handle the truth. And yet. David returned quietly, leaning against the doorway as if unsure of his welcome. He glanced at her, and the tension between them, still thick from hours of unresolved feelings, took form. I didn't know what to do, he said quietly. Seeing you like that. I didn't know if I should. Becky's eyes flickered. She swallowed hard, knowing he had no idea how close he had come to discovering her secret. You shouldn't have been here, she whispered. Not tonight. Not with the baby, our baby, involved. David froze, the weight of her words sinking in. Our baby. Becky looked down, biting her lip. Yes. Yours. And mine. I never told you. The air thickened. Words left unsaid clung to the room like smoke. David's face paled, and for the first time in years he was silent. Why now? He finally asked, his voice breaking. Why didn't you tell me before? Becky looked away. Memories flooded her. The night he walked out, the heartbreak, the lonely months of fear, pain and uncertainty. She had loved him, trusted him, and he had left. I was scared, she admitted softly. Scared you wouldn't care, scared you'd walk away like before. David ran a hand through his hair. I didn't know. I should have been there. I should have. No, Becky interrupted, tears glistening in her eyes. Don't say it. You weren't there. You don't get to rewrite that. Not now. The truth hung between them, bitter and sharp. But in the middle of it, something fragile began to shift. A small, tentative recognition that their shared past wasn't all pain. There was still love, buried beneath years of misunderstandings. David moved closer, unsure whether to touch or speak. I remember, he began slowly. The night you left the message. I didn't understand why you disappeared. I thought I had lost you forever. Becky's heart tightened. You did. You didn't know I was pregnant. You didn't know. Yes, he whispered. And I was a fool. I was blind to everything. I thought I could control everything else, but not you. Not us. She looked at him, really looked at him. The vulnerability, the regret, the raw honesty. She had spent months imagining this conversation, rehearsing it in her mind, and now it was happening, messy and real. I never wanted to bring him into a world where his father wouldn't be there, she admitted, voice trembling. I wanted him to have someone who would fight for him, and for me. David swallowed hard. And I want that too, he said quietly. I want to fight for both of you. I may have missed years, Becky, but I won't miss this chance. For the first time in the day, the tension between them softened. Becky's hands rested on her belly, David's gaze fixed on both mother and child. The room was silent except for the faint beeping of monitors, the sound grounding them in the present while their pasts intertwined in a fragile, delicate dance. You were scared, David said gently. I understand now. I can't change the past, but I can try to be here now, if you'll let me. Becky swallowed hard, the weight of her fear clashing with the desire she had buried for so long. It's not that simple, she whispered. You can't just step back into our lives. The baby me, this is more than you think. I know, David said softly, taking a careful step closer. I want to try. To make things right. To be the father you both deserve. Her eyes welled up. She wanted to scream, to laugh, to cry, to believe. But there was still a fragility she couldn't ignore. The history, the betrayal, the fear. And yet, for the first time, the past wasn't a wall anymore. It was a bridge. Hours passed in quiet conversation, punctuated by moments of hesitation and honesty. They revisited old memories, acknowledged mistakes, and allowed glimpses of hope to flicker in the spaces between the pain. Becky realized that vulnerability didn't have to be weakness. David realized that regret wasn't useless if it inspired action. And together, they began to piece together a fragile, tentative bond, a foundation for the love that had never truly died. The past hadn't vanished, but it no longer had to control them. Do you think David can truly make amends? Or is some damage too deep to repair? Share your thoughts in the comments. The following morning, sunlight crept through the blinds, casting gentle stripes across the hospital room. The soft hum of machines had become a comforting rhythm, almost like a heartbeat that echoed the tentative connection forming between David and Becky. Becky was awake, sitting up in bed with a warm cup of tea in her hands. Her belly had grown overnight, and she instinctively placed her palm over it, feeling the soft, rhythmic movements of the baby inside. David sat nearby, leaning against the wall with a newspaper in his hands, but he wasn't reading. His eyes kept finding her, observing the rise and fall of her chest with a mix of awe and lingering guilt. You're drinking tea like it's coffee, David said softly, a small smile tugging at his lips. Becky laughed lightly, the sound airy and unexpected in the quiet room. It's the only thing keeping me sane today, she admitted. He nodded, understanding more in that simple admission than any grand declaration. The walls they had built around their hearts were starting to crumble, brick by brick. You know, he said after a pause, I never realized how small moments like this could matter. Watching you, seeing you, it's grounding. Becky looked at him, caught off guard by his honesty. She had spent months imagining confrontation, arguments, tears, and apologies, but not this calm, almost gentle vulnerability. Grounding, she repeated, raising an eyebrow. Are you serious, David? He nodded. Yes. For once. I feel like we're not running from something. We're just here. The nurse came in with a checklist, but David and Becky barely noticed. They shared quiet laughter over minor things. The silly sound of the monitor, a joke from the previous night, the awkwardness of hospital gowns. For the first time, they were just two people. Not billionaire and doctor, not past lovers with old wounds, just two humans sharing a fragile moment of peace. Becky noticed how his laughter, hesitant at first, was sincere. David noticed how her eyes softened when she smiled. Every small gesture became a thread weaving them closer together. As the day wore on, David helped her adjust pillows, made sure she had water within reach, and even offered to read to her when she requested it. The gestures were subtle, but they carried weight. A quiet declaration of care that spoke louder than words. Becky found herself relaxing in ways she hadn't in years. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel that maybe, just maybe, this man who had once broken her heart could be a source of comfort and safety. "Thank you," she whispered one afternoon. Her voice almost lost among the beeps and distant footsteps. "For what?" he asked, pretending to be casual, but his heart leapt. "For staying," she said simply. "For not disappearing again." David smiled, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. "I'm not going anywhere," he said quietly. Later, as the afternoon sun softened the room, Becky reached over to touch David's hand. It was tentative at first, fingers brushing, then settling into a steady, reassuring grip. "I was so afraid," she admitted softly, "that you wouldn't care, that all of this wouldn't matter to you." David held her hand tighter, his thumb stroking gently. "It matters," he said firmly. "You matter. The baby matters. I've realized what's important, and I'm not letting it go again." Becky's eyes glistened, but she didn't look away. Instead, she let herself trust the moment. Let herself feel the fragile bond forming between them. For the first time, the past didn't feel like a shadow. It felt like a bridge. The afternoon faded into evening, but the room remained a sanctuary. They shared stories of childhood, memories long buried, and even a few quiet jokes that reminded them of simpler times. The laughter and gentle teasing eased the tension, creating a space where love could tentatively begin to flourish. Becky rested her head against the pillows, glancing at David with a soft smile. "I don't want to think about the future too much," she admitted. "I just want this. Right now. With you here." David nodded, understanding completely. "Then let's stay here for now," he said. "Just this moment. Nothing else matters." And for the first time in what felt like forever, both hearts felt lighter. Not healed completely, but ready to try. The following evening, the hospital room felt heavy with an uneasy silence. Rain had returned, tapping insistently against the windows, as if echoing the tension inside. David and Becky had spent the day cautiously rebuilding trust, sharing quiet moments and small laughter. But shadows of doubt and old fears lingered, waiting for the slightest spark to ignite them. David had stepped out for a brief call, leaving Becky resting in the chair, her hands lightly stroking her belly. She was tired, mentally and physically, yet content in the fragile peace they had forged. But peace is fragile, and life has a way of testing it. A nurse knocked softly, entering with a tablet in her hand. "Dr. Harrison, there's a call for you from your assistant. It's urgent." David glanced at Becky. "I'll be right back." The moment he left, a sudden alert on the monitor startled Becky. The fetal heart rate had dipped slightly. Panic surged through her. She called for the nurse, her voice trembling. David returned immediately, concern etched across his face. "What happened?" "The baby's heart rate dropped temporarily," the nurse explained, adjusting the monitors. "It's stable now, but you need to stay calm." Becky's hands shook as she processed the warning. David's face reflected worry, but also something else, an intensity she hadn't seen before. "You're overreacting," he said sharply, more to himself than to her. Becky recoiled. "I'm not overreacting. I felt it." David ran a hand through his hair, frustration spilling over. "Becky, you can't panic every time something happens. You'll wear yourself down. And the baby." Becky stood, voice rising. Don't tell me how I feel. This is my body, my child." The words hung in the air like a storm. David opened his mouth, trying to apologize, but the tension snapped. "I can't do this with you if every heartbeat feels like a crisis," he shouted, anger and fear mingling. Becky's eyes filled with tears. "I thought you understood. I thought we were different now." The room, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage. Machines beeped steadily, almost mocking their inability to communicate without hurt. The doctor entered, alerted by the raised voices. "Everything is under control. You both need to calm down," he said, but the calm authority did little to ease the tension. David stepped back, running a hand over his face. I just want to protect both of you," he admitted, voice quieter but strained. Becky's chest heaved with emotion. "And I need you to trust me. I'm not a child. I've been carrying this responsibility alone long before you arrived." The past years, the fear, the abandonment, all of it surged in that moment. Two hearts, raw and fragile, collided with words sharper than knives. David turned away, shoulders slumping. Maybe I'm not enough. Maybe I never will be," he whispered, the weight of guilt pressing down. Becky sank into the chair, tears streaming freely now. "Maybe I was wrong to believe in us again," she admitted, voice breaking. For the first time, both of them questioned whether love, hope, and connection were worth it. The bond they had started to build felt shattered, as if the fragile trust of the past hours had been reduced to dust. Even the baby's gentle kicks seemed drowned out by the storm of emotions surrounding them. Hours passed in silence. The rain continued outside, relentless. Inside, the room felt cold despite the machines and lights. David sat at a distance, staring at the floor, grappling with guilt, frustration, and fear of failure. Becky rested her head against her hand, exhausted, feeling the bitter sting of disappointment and betrayal. They had reached the shatter point. The moment where love is tested most brutally. They could have walked away, letting fear and anger dictate their actions. But deep down, beneath the hurt, the embers of connection still glowed. The question remained. Would they let the shattering moment define them? Or could it become the turning point that forced them to confront their deepest vulnerabilities? Do you think David and Becky can recover from this blow? Or is this the point of no return? Share your thoughts in the comments. The night after the shattering argument, the hospital was eerily quiet. The rain had softened to a gentle drizzle, but inside, the weight of yesterday's conflict lingered like a thick fog. Both David and Becky were alone in their respective rooms, facing their emotions with a raw honesty they hadn't allowed themselves before. For David, the hours had been endless. He stared out the window at the shimmering city lights, thinking about Becky's words, her tears, and the sound of her voice when she said, "Maybe I was wrong to believe in us again." Each phrase tore at him, forcing him to confront the depth of his mistakes and the fear of losing them forever. He ran a hand through his hair and pressed his forehead against the cool glass. "I can't let this go," he whispered to himself. "I can't lose her, not now, not ever." The image of Becky, fragile and strong at the same time, with her hands resting protectively over her belly, filled his mind. His pride, the years of avoidance, all of it suddenly seemed insignificant compared to what he stood to lose. The chance to be a father, the chance to love her again. He picked up his phone and hesitated, staring at her number. Every fiber of his being wanted to reach out, but doubt clawed at him. What if she rejects me? What if I've broken it too badly? Finally, he made his choice. He would act, no matter the fear. Love required courage. Meanwhile, Becky sat on the edge of her bed, holding a pillow against her chest. The night stretched before her, quiet except for the faint hum of the monitors. She replayed the fight in her mind, the anger, the disappointment, and the lingering hurt. She wanted to close her heart, to protect herself and the baby from further pain. Yet even in the solitude, she felt the pull of what they had shared. The laughter, the gentle moments, the tenderness that had begun to grow. The truth was undeniable. She loved him, and the thought of him leaving again made her stomach twist with fear. Her hand instinctively rested on her belly. "I can't do this alone," she whispered. "I need him. I need him to choose to stay." David returned, walking slowly down the quiet hallway. His steps were measured, deliberate, each one a testament to the decision he had made. He knocked softly on her door. Becky didn't respond immediately. Her heart raced, caught between hope and fear. "I'm here," he said gently, voice low but firm. "I've made my choice. I want to be here for you. For the baby. For us." She looked up, tears brimming, searching his eyes for truth. The vulnerability there was undeniable, raw and sincere. "You're really here?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Yes," he said, taking a tentative step closer. "I'm not going anywhere this time." Becky hesitated, her mind torn between caution and longing, pride warred with desire, past pain with present hope. Finally, she exhaled and allowed herself to rise from the bed. David extended his hand, a silent invitation. She took it, letting their fingers intertwine. The simple touch carried the weight of everything they had endured. The fear, the longing, the anger, and the love that had never truly left. "I'm scared," she admitted softly, leaning against him. "I know," he said, wrapping an arm around her shoulder. "I'm scared too. But we'll face it together. No more running, no more hiding." For a long moment, they simply stood there, holding each other, letting the storm of the past hours wash away. The silence was not empty. It was filled with understanding, forgiveness, and the promise of a future built on honesty and shared strength. David pressed his forehead gently against hers. "We can start again," he whispered. "Right now. Together." Becky closed her eyes, allowing herself to believe, to feel the fragile hope blossoming. "Together," she echoed. Outside, the rain had almost stopped. Inside, hearts that had been broken were choosing to beat together once more. The morning sun filtered gently through the hospital blinds, casting a warm glow over the room where David and Becky now sat side by side. The storm had passed outside, leaving streets glistening with rain, and a sense of calm that mirrored the fragile peace inside. After the previous night's emotional confrontation, both had spent the hours reflecting, understanding, and making the choice to move forward together. David held Becky's hand in his thumb brushing over her knuckles as he looked at her with a mixture of love, relief, and awe. Becky, in turn, leaned slightly against him, feeling the steady strength of his presence. There was still vulnerability, of course, pain and doubt could surface, but now they shared it rather than carrying it alone. David's eyes drifted to her belly, the baby's soft movements echoing the heartbeat of the past months. He whispered gently, "I was so scared I had lost you both forever. But now being here, holding your hand, I know we can face anything." Becky smiled, a genuine warmth lighting her eyes. "I was scared too. But we're here. Together. That's what matters." The echoes of their shared history, the misunderstandings, the fear, the broken trust, had transformed into lessons rather than barriers. Each challenge had taught them patience, resilience, and the courage to love again. Later, as the doctor prepared Becky for a routine check, David remained by her side. The small room felt like a sanctuary, not a hospital ward, filled with quiet laughter, gentle touches, and whispered reassurances. "I never imagined holding your hand like this again," David admitted softly. "Neither did I," Becky said, squeezing his hand gently. "It feels like a second chance at everything." And in that moment, the past seemed distant. The fears that had loomed over them had been confronted, and the choices they made, facing vulnerability, embracing truth, and staying despite pain, had begun to bear fruit. Outside the hospital, the first rays of sunlight glimmered across the city. Inside, David and Becky shared a quiet moment, their fingers intertwined and their hearts beating in sync. "I promise," David whispered, "to always be here. For you. For our baby. For us." Becky rested her head on his shoulder. "And I promise to trust you, to let us grow together, and to believe in the love we almost lost." They laughed softly, a tender, genuine sound that spoke of healing, hope, and renewal. The storm, both outside and within their hearts, had passed, leaving clarity, warmth, and the promise of a future built on connection and commitment. Days later, as the baby moved gently inside her, Becky and David sat by the window together, sharing stories, plans, and quiet dreams. The bond they had rebuilt had become stronger, tested by adversity and solidified by choice. David traced the curve of her belly, whispering promises of care, love, and devotion. Becky responded with smiles and laughter, knowing that the past no longer dictated their present. Love had found its way. Not effortlessly, not without struggle, but resilient, patient, and true. As the hospital prepared for the day, David and Becky sat side by side. The city alive outside, their world quietly whole inside. The baby's gentle kicks reminded them of what had been worth fighting for. Love, trust, family. David whispered one last time. No matter what comes, we face it together. Becky nodded, resting her hand over his. Together, she echoed, sealing a promise that had survived storms, tears, and doubt. And in that quiet, golden morning, their hearts finally found home. What do you think of David and Becky's journey? Could love like theirs survive the trials of life? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you so much for watching this story all the way to the end. Your time, your support, and your presence here mean more than words can say. If this story touched your heart, inspired you, or kept you watching, please make sure to subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this one. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss a new upload. Until next time, stay blessed, stay strong, and keep believing in love. See you in the next story.